Geordie Journos back here outside the Newcastle United Media Centre, where we've been speaking to Eddie Howe ahead of that small clash with Liverpool at St James's Park on Monday night. Of course, as you'd expect, as you'd probably be slightly frustrated by, the game and questions about the game were few and far between. It was all about, as it has been throughout the summer, about Alexander Isak once again. But don't turn off, because we've got plenty to say about it, and we've got plenty to say on the transfer front in the second half of this video as well. So, Jordan, where would you like to start on Eddie Howe's press conference and what he said about things in general? What was your big takeaway from Eddie Howe's press conference this morning?
Yeah, so there's a difference here about wanting to talk about it and probably having to, because it was ultimately the agenda today, and that was the Alexander Isak.
Fair play to you, fair play to Jordan, by the way. Didn't ask one about Alexander Isak, and you made a point that you didn't want to. Well, you didn't ask one, and I think Eddie Howe appreciated that.
Yeah, I just thought I would have been asking a similar question, and realistically probably would have given a similar answer. So I didn't want to waste, and I never not waste questions. I think sometimes I don't always ask the greatest questions, of course, but yeah, I thought I was going down a different angle, which will come on in the second part of the show, because it is related to the striker situation. If you've watched the press conference before this, you'll probably know what we're going to talk about, but still, let us give a bit more detail on that and our thoughts on it. But yeah, I mean, all the questions in that press conference, probably about 80%, if not more, actually, on Alexander Isak.
Yeah, and linked to him in some way.
And that's ultimately the agenda going into the game, because of all the teams they're playing on Monday, it's Liverpool. And yeah, there's a lot to get through with Alexander Isak stuff. Of course, it's all stemmed from this week and the Tuesday in particular, which of course we've done the video on with Alexander Isak accusing the football club of breaking promises. The football club have then denied that they've ever said he can leave. So we're at the situation now where realistically it's unchanged in many ways, because Alexander Isak, as you probably would have guessed, isn't going to be involved on Monday. When he returns, again, it's still very much unclear, and that's if he stays. And of course, the club statement suggests that he probably will, but there's still time. So yeah, a lot to get through. The top line for me, I would say, the line that I took from it was, it might seem quite minor, but the fact that Eddie Howe has not spoken to Alexander Isak since that bombshell statement from him on Tuesday night, I think is interesting and possibly concerning.
For a manager who continually throughout this summer and even in the press conference day expressed he has a good relationship with Alexander Isak and sort of gives a very positive character reference for Alexander Isak, yet hasn't spoke to him and did express his disappointment in the way it's played out in terms of the publishing of the statement, and he sort of reiterated the club's stance where it was disappointment, and he feels like that was probably something that should have been a conversation behind closed doors if it hadn't been already.
Yeah, and there hasn't been one this week from what Eddie Howe has told us. So given that Alexander Isak is still turning up at the training ground, it's late afternoon that Alexander Isak has been turning up at the training ground, Eddie Howe is still there. I'm not sure for how long exactly, but Eddie Howe has still been in the building when Alexander Isak has entered the building, and the fact that there hasn't been a conversation between the two after that statement, I mean, I think that's
speaks volumes.
Speaks volumes. I'm trying to think of the word. It's very, very interesting. That's not really a good word to describe it, but it's just the fact that they haven't spoken. You would just expect it, given how volatile it was, because it was a volatile statement by Alexander. He's been over this. The accusations that he made against the football club, and then that last line as well when he said, "When trust is broken, relationships can't continue." Yeah. And one thing in the statement as well is when he spoke about the people have had their say. Realistically, the only person that's had his say on this from a Newcastle United perspective, excluding that club statement, was Eddie Howe. So was that a dig at Eddie Howe? But based on what Eddie Howe saying, he maintains a good relationship with the player, but hasn't spoken this week. So that I thought with a statement that was so volatile, there would be some kind of comment, like face-to-face talks over it. Look, there might have been that, but Eddie Howe has just said now that there hasn't been.
Feels like a breakdown in communication between the player and the club,
which who's, because I think Eddie Howe would want to speak to Alexander Isak. I would probably suggest it's more from his side, because as I say, his actions, as some have suggested, his actions and words actually have said to the player he does not want to be here. And I do wonder if he's put that statement out now and it's just sort of left it and let it. As much as Newcastle United didn't let it fester, he might let it fester inside the walls of the training ground, because if he's not speaking to his manager, obviously hasn't seen all of his teammates for a while now. It's just the situation's just quite remarkable. I still find it quite remarkable. What happens again? It's under 10 days left now. No communication between the pairs. We speak. It's going to be a big week coming up. I can't imagine they'll speak before the Liverpool game because Eddie Howe's preparations are on that now. But
Alexander Isak won't be involved for the Liverpool game. Eddie Howe did confirm, to the surprise of no one, and he couldn't really confirm as or when he'd be back. He said he's not a fortune teller. So.
Yeah, well, much you'd like to be. But I think
change of profession.
Yeah, I think it's fairly clear that he'll not play before the transfer window closes. I think that's pretty obvious.
Do you
he's never going to play against Liverpool. He won't play against Leeds.
No. Do you think he'll play again for Newcastle?
I think he will. Yeah, I think he will.
Sorry.
No, I was saying I think that statement the other night suggests that he's going to stay. That it's not a definite to say he's definitely staying, but I think it's as good as what Newcastle could have said at that point to say they do not foresee the conditions of the sale being met, and this is where the lose-lose situation comes in, which I think is important to touch upon as well, because I think as much as the words lose-lose are probably put in Eddie Howe's mouth a little bit, because the question did include a lose-lose situation, but essentially you've got the football club have got a player that they don't want to sell, and they've got a player that doesn't want to be here. It's pretty. But the win after this, if there is a win, because I don't believe there isn't a win after this, it's not ideal, but the win after that is that he does come back and he reintegrates, but it's only a win for a short term, because we know if he comes back we'll be having the same conversations in January and definitely next summer.
Yeah, exactly. It's not an ideal situation, and Eddie Howe actually said it's not an ideal situation for anyone to be in. Alexander Isak himself wouldn't want to be in this situation, which I thought was quite telling, almost a suggestion of some sympathy for Eddie Howe for Alexander Isak's situation. And one thing Eddie Howe's been fairly consistent of throughout this Alexander Isak process is he's always spoken very highly. I spoke just before about character reference. I mean, if Liverpool want a good character reference for Alexander Isak, Eddie Howe's given them one, even though actions speak louder than words. And Alexander Isak's actions over the past month, I think, are indefensible, but Eddie Howe is still defending him, and that's not a criticism of Eddie Howe, by the way. I think he has to, as a manager of the football club, with the club's and his own best interests at heart. If your alternative is having no striker, you've got to leave the door open and not completely alienate a player who has completely alienated himself. You have to leave that door open for him to come back into it, and that's still the message Eddie Howe is stressing. But that was something I asked Eddie Howe, because he said Alexander Isak is really professional, he's a good lad, I think quotes he said, and I went, Eddie, you've just said he's really professional and good lad. That does not add up with Alexander Isak's actions. So is there,
from an outside perspective, and it's right, we think he's been a disgrace, the supporters definitely think he's been a disgrace, so how is he a good lad and a professional, which is what you essentially asked.
Yes, and Eddie Howe said, well, the two situations are different. I'm going off the Alexander Isak I work with, I know, and things like that. And this situation that's transpired the past summer, still the same Alexander Isak, by the way, which is probably why I don't fully agree with what Eddie Howe was saying, is sort of gone against all that. So I think it's Eddie Howe can only say what he wants to try and manage the situation as best he can.
He's very, very reluctant to criticise the player, because as you've just touched upon there, why would you criticise a player that you might have to try? Well,
and you want back.
You're going to have to reintegrate if he stays. You're going to have to find a way of reintegrating him. Yeah. So I understand from Eddie Howe's perspective why he isn't criticising Alexander Isak. I was going to ask him a question today. One of my questions was, do you feel disrespected by Alexander Isak? I don't think you would have said yes to that question. I don't think you would have answered that question. But I would be surprised deep down, and not even deep down, he's not saying it publicly, but I would be surprised if Eddie Howe didn't feel disrespected, because that statement in midweek, as I say, the attack on the club and broken promises, I'm not training with his teammates or playing with his team. It's a big two fingers that they've done for him for the last 3 years, and I do think Eddie Howe will probably have that feeling as well. But as I say, he cannot speak like that when he's got a situation potentially in just over a week's time where he's going to have to go, Alex, son, you've stayed now. We're gonna have to get you back in, and he's going to have to be the man that does that. It'll fall on him. to get him back in the group. I suppose there'll be conversations higher up at the football club as well with key personnel. But Eddie Howe is ultimately the man that has to manage him every day. So that's why he's not criticising him. And realistically, from Eddie Howe's perspective, I don't think we can really criticise him for not criticising Alexander.
No, exactly. I think Eddie Howe's handled this very well. And if you came out swinging for Alexander Isak,
I think
while it would make very good copy and headlines, it's not what Newcastle United want.
Exactly. I think supporters would love it. We'd obviously love it from a media perspective and having those quotes as you just mentioned. But as I say, when there's a situation at play when they're going to have to reintegrate him if he stays, then it doesn't make any sense for the manager to be publicly criticising.
I think if there was no future for Alexander Isak at Newcastle United, Eddie Howe's tone and what he's saying would be different. I think
Very
what
true.
Eddie Howe is saying suggests that there is a future for Alexander Isak at Newcastle United. And he also said he thinks the fans would eventually get on Alexander Isak's side again, because ultimately, I talk about actions speak louder than words. If Alexander Isak comes back and scores a few goals, then fair enough, fans will cheer him. What I would say to Eddie Howe was saying it'll be fine again. It's never going to be the same. It's always going to be Alexander Isak could come back in the side, score 20 goals before January. In the back of everyone's head is what you did in the summer. It's never going to be the same. He's never going to be Alexander the Great again.
No, I agree. As I say, I think he doesn't have a long-term future here. It's simple. Next summer, we'll be having the same conversations. How can you really cheer the goals of a man that ultimately doesn't see his long-term or even short-term future here?
Exactly. And on that note, we'll have a word from our sponsors and we'll talk about some of the non-Alexander Isak related stuff in the second half of this video, and a bit on the transfer front as well. So here's a word from our sponsors. Comply IT Limited. Worrying about disposing of your old IT equipment? Don't be. Comply IT handle everything. Secure collection, detailed tracking, and certified data destruction. That's Comply IT Limited. As 4 Rivers Financial Planning. 4 Rivers Financial Planning offer holistic financial advice for all stages of life, ensuring your plan remains robust and adaptable in the ever-changing world we live in. So those were our words from our sponsors, and I had an interesting message from a viewer ahead of the press conference this morning saying I should ask Eddie Howe if he's worried about disposing of his old IT equipment, which I don't think you could pay me enough money in the world to ask him, and I'm sure his answer would be no. But if he said yes, I'd be, don't be. Honestly.
Well, I'd say the training grounds are being done out nicely. They're building an extension there, so
might be throwing out a few computers.
Exactly. So, Eddie, if you're watching, definitely not. But if you are, and you're worried about disposing of your old IT equipment, don't be. Comply IT Limited.
That's a new one.
We've rehearsed that one.
Well, actually, I haven't. That's the beauty of it. So, yes, on the transfer front, though, that's where we wanted to move on to, and was a question you asked. Thankfully, a breath of fresh air in the press conference.
Striker situation now. One thing that's lost in all this, all the noise about Alexander Isak, looking for Alexander Isak replacements, and let him go to Liverpool. When realistically, Newcastle are still looking for a replacement for a striker they lost on July 1st, where Callum Wilson left on at the end of his contract, has now joined West Ham United. So Newcastle, essentially 2 games into the season now, still don't have a recognised striker. Alexander Isak taking the huff. No Callum Wilson. Will Asula, which he touched upon in the press conference, has pretty much said what we all knew and suspected. He's happy with him, but he isn't Premier League ready. He doesn't view him as a player with Premier League experience, hence why Anthony Gordon has started the season and will continue against Liverpool on Monday night. So yes, they're still looking for that striker. Now, the striker market, as we've known, they've had many rejections this summer. Hugo Ekitike, Benjamin Sesko, João Pedro, bids for them, whatever, talks to them. Liam Delap as well, who they spoke to, that's another one. So a lot of striker rejections there. The striker market, as Eddie Howe has touched upon, is a small pool. It's a difficult market. Now heading into the final, is it 10 days now? 10 days?
Yeah, it's next Tuesday.
Final 10 days of the window, and Newcastle still don't have a striker in. A bid rejected for Johan Wissa this week. Links to Jurgen Strang-Larsen of Wolves, which will please you because you were in a video.
Dream signing for me, wasn't he, at the start of the summer?
So they're the 2 names being linked now. Big price tags. Is there a scenario where Newcastle United don't sign a striker in the final 10 days and keep Alexander Isak, and I got the quote here, so I don't want to misquote Eddie Howe, but he said, this is the question, I said, in terms of striker market, given how difficult it is there a scenario where you don't make any further signs between now and the end of the window? Eddie Howe said, yes, of course, I mean, that's equally possible. We're still active in the market, but as I say all the time, the transfer has to be right. And he goes on to talk about PSR situation. So, do I think Newcastle will sign a striker? Yes, I think they are. I think they have to. But as it creeps closer, it's getting a bit squeaky bum time, I would say, because they've suffered a lot of pain in that area this summer. They have for several different reasons, as I say, Alexander Isak's dropping, losing Callum Wilson. So they've suffered a lot of pain in that area, but they've got 10 days to sort it, and it's not a huge amount of time to get a striker in. And as I say, when the pool is so small, yes, it's difficult, which is Eddie Howe has alluded to.
Yeah, they're going down and down and further down the list, aren't they? And now it's like Jørgen Strand Larsen, who's a player, look, we know Eddie Howe has liked, and Hugo Ekitike was one he even admitted to liking.
The Wasps came back.
Oh, God's sake, it's been hanging around for a week. So, yeah, Eddie Howe came out and said he liked Hugo Ekitike, that's no secret, and that's failed to transpire. Now you're looking at the Johan Visser, who's been a long-term target in the subject of the transfer window itself over a month. They've been looking at him, and now you're getting links where if you were told at the start of the summer you'd be looking at them, you'd probably roll your eyes, but now it's a situation of desperation, and I think that's why the Alexander Isak situation is so frustrating, because at the start of the summer, say Liam Delap, for example, doesn't want to come to Newcastle to play second fiddle to Alexander Isak. Now at the end of the summer, selling clubs are going, you're in a desperate situation, you don't have a striker. Yeah. This player we've just paid 23 million for, double that, and then a little bit more on top. It's really hard for Newcastle United now, and this sort of narrative of it being a successful transfer window, Eddie Howe said it's been a positive window. There's been talk, it's been a really good window for Newcastle United. Look, I think it's been 80% a positive window for Newcastle United, but there's still a glaring failure in the window, which is the striker. You start this summer knowing you need a striker, and now we're just over a week left of the transfer window, still needing a striker. And in your answer, Eddie Howe alluded to PSR, which I think makes sense, because when PSR's overhanging you, do you go and spend over the odds on a player who's basically a short-term fix?
Or a player that you're not necessarily convinced on.
Exactly.
Which is another issue.
And that's where PSR comes into it. But for me, Eddie Howe was asked about Alexander Isak and was he aware of the situation? Did he have talks with Alexander Isak about his future before the end of the season? Eddie Howe said yes, but wouldn't go as far as saying Alexander Isak expressed his desire to leave to him. He said that conversation will remain private. But if what we are led to believe is in fact true, and Alexander Isak has expressed his desire to leave before the end of the season, Callum Wilson's situation was there for all to see. Everyone expected him to leave the club. He did leave the club. So you've got two players, one you know is going to leave and one is wanting to leave. How do you then go into a summer and then have a full summer transfer window, 3 months, and now we're in the end of the window still needing a striker? I think that would be an absolute failure if Newcastle don't sign a striker before the end of the transfer window. If they sign a striker, great. I'd say it's been a successful transfer window. But signing that striker is a make or break for Newcastle United this summer, because that is, we spoke about it on previous videos, is really the main target and has become more pressing with the Alexander Isak situation. I know we've said previously a centre-back, and they've addressed that, but they had other centre-backs that don't have a striker at the moment, and they need one. So I won't say this transfer window has been a success. I'd say it's been a failure unless they sign a striker, and there's still time. And if they do sign a striker, then I'll say, look, it has been a good transfer window, because they've addressed the goalkeeper, not the first choice, by the way. They've addressed a centre-back, again, not the first choice. Right winger, more or less the first choice, you'd say. Definitely a top target. And then have the strengthen the midfield options as well, which was almost impossible to actually strengthen the starting 11 of the midfield. We never expected that, but they have addressed the midfield. They've sold Sean Longstaff, a player who again were expected to be away, and brought Jacob Ramsey in, who I just think raises the the ground of Newcastle's squad and improves it in that respect. And Eddie Howe addressed that as well.
I agree with all that.
Need a striker.
I think it's been successful to a point, but if they don't get a striker in the final 10 days of transfer window, it has been a disaster, because then you're going into the season with a striker that doesn't want to be here, who you're trying to get back in the building. And then you've also got a Champions League campaign where the backup striker is Anthony Gordon, and Anthony Gordon is great, and I love him, we all love him, can do a job up front, but they miss so much of him when he's not on the left hand side, and that's his preferred position, and that's where he should be playing. So to have such a busy campaign full of European and domestic football, and to only have a striker who could potentially be half-arsed.
And losing one of your best players as a left winger as well.
Yeah, and losing, so you essentially lose two players and then, don't you?
Yeah, you're losing the left wing Anthony Gordon, and you're losing one of the best strikers around as well.
Yeah.
So, poor from you, Alexander Isak.
That's the thing. He's totally blown. Realistically, he's blown the whole summer up. Realistically, through his actions, and it's obviously all the focus be on him. But one thing that has really stayed consistent throughout this process is the need of replacement for Callum Wilson. That's never changed, really.
No.
It's just focus is almost sort of sharpened because of Alexander Isak throwing a strop.
We could have done this video at the start of the year and said, what did Newcastle need in the summer? Well, they'll need a replacement for Callum Wilson because he's going to leave.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, we're nearly 9 months into the year now, end of August. To still not have addressed that, I think, is really... And there's reasons for it. Eddie Howe's explained the reasons. It's not through the want of trying, but it's very frustrating, and that's why I can't stand here and say it's been a good summer for Newcastle United. The Alexander Isak situation has obviously overshadowed it, but even going beneath the surface of that and looking at the facts, what Newcastle have actually done, and they've done a lot. It's progressed well over the last month. Still haven't done the main thing which they needed to do and have needed to do for the best part of the past year. Yeah,
agree. Signing a striker in the next couple of weeks makes or breaks this transfer window, regardless of what happens to Alexander Isak. I think, again, if Alexander Isak is to go, they're going to have to sign two strikers, and that's probably not going to happen, because they've spent the best part of 3 months trying to find one and haven't.
That would be some turnaround. That would be the biggest comeback since Arsenal in 2011.
I think there's a few twists and turns. I'll say I don't think this Isak saga is totally finished. Yeah. And maybe if there is a position or potentially that he end up going, then maybe they just go, right, well, we need to replace him, and they go and splash for money. But again, that doesn't go back to what Eddie Howe said about PSR. That would almost be blowing the PSR narrative out. It's going, we've got all this money from Alexander. He said, we'll just can't buy him and him. I don't think that's how the club will operate. I think that's quite clear. So yeah, let's see what the next week or so brings. And I do think they'll get a strike over the line. I think they've got to. I think they've absolutely got to, and I don't see a way how they could progress without having one. But it's not a guarantee.
No. What do you think about Johan Visser? Do you think what position is he in? Is it because that looked, I'd say probably a week ago, that looked fairly nailed on.
It was. I think it's like a desperation from the players' side, isn't it? I think it's quite clear that Brentford don't want to deal the price tag that Newcastle want to, and I think all the positive noises are coming because the player is absolutely desperate to come. And as long as the player holds out hope of coming, Newcastle probably will. But you, at the end of the day, looking for a compromise, in Brentford in a similar position to Newcastle, really. Yeah. If they've got a player there, and they've already lost a lot of key players this summer. I know Newcastle haven't obviously lost a lot of key players, but still, they've got a striker there who they want to keep. If they lose them, they're in a worse position, similar to Newcastle. So I understand from Brentford's point of view, but I think whilst the player wants to come, maybe his wishes will be considered, but it might be a late one. Don't know. Yes,
and for all the Liverpool fans in the comments who go, well, what about Wissa's situation and Alexander Isak? It doesn't add up. Well, really, the Johan Wissa situation is completely different to Alexander Isak.
It really is. No, it is totally different. It infuriates me that it's almost like a stick used to bat Newcastle fans. Go, well, you can't say this because Wissa's doing this. Realistically, without explaining why, it's different. I don't really care though. I don't care what Wissa's doing at Brentford.
It's nothing to do with Newcastle United. Alexander Isak not playing for Newcastle is something to do with Newcastle United and is hurting their chances of winning games. That is why we're talking about it. Johan Wissa's sort of politics and agreements and things like that with Brentford are nothing to do with Newcastle United. We don't really care. And Brentford, the only value for Johan Wissa is what Brentford value him at. I'm not sitting here going, shame on Brentford for not letting Johan Wissa leave the club. Good on you, Brentford. You value the player at X amount of money. That's fine.
There's
Newcastle have to pay that if they want to trigger that.
Yeah.
Liverpool have to pay what Newcastle think Alexander Isak is worth. The only people who actually put price tags, or only entities that put price tags on players and value the players, are the clubs who they are contracted to.
Yeah.
So,
Go on, Tom.
yes.
Tell them.
And Johan
Get them
Visser,
tell us.
by the way, is training.
Yes, he is training
So,
now.
again, a different situation.
But he's training now, and realistically, even if he was, I don't care. It's not Newcastle. I don't report on Newcastle. I don't have a I report on Newcastle. I've got a connection with Newcastle. I don't report on Brentford. I don't have affection for Brentford. So
yeah, and we're not going to Brentford, or Newcastle fans aren't going to Brentford. Well, the same ones. Free Visser, get in.
I hashtag free Wisser.
I mean,
Bugger off.
Some might, but they will have been inspired by the Liverpool fans. So yeah. We'll see you on Monday night at St James's Park.
I went to that little bit of a rant.
Yeah, why not? Why not? I'm sure
You did it.
Monday night will be interesting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking for that. Look, it's all the stuff of like Liverpool turning up and getting rolled over and Newcastle be sort of steamroll. That's not going to happen. They are the Premier League champions. They are a very, 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 very good team.
Yes.
But it's going to have a proper edge to it. These games always do cuts Liverpool, but
Yeah.
this Isak situation has just blown the whole. This has potential for all the classics that have been before between Newcastle and Liverpool. This could blow it. And I would be surprised if there wasn't. This is me really building up. I'd be surprised if there wasn't a couple of
Tasty
hoopings or a couple of VAR reviews potentially. I just think it's got that feel to it. The players react off the fans' emotions. I think the fans are going to that stadium on Monday wanting blood in the nicest way possible.
Yes.
That's not encouraging violence, by the way.
No.
But it's just
That's a figure of speech from you.
Yes, it is.
Not
I'm not a Liverpool fans who tend to watch our videos. I'm not saying I want someone to go in and break someone's leg, for example. I don't want that.
No.
But it's going to have a proper edge to it because the Newcastle are in the situation that they find themselves in, are fighting against the football club who have essentially tried to take the nick out in this summer by trying to get their star striker. So it's just there's a natural edge to it, and let's see how it unfolds.
Yeah, it's got all the makings of a classic, and quite often the very good games themselves. We'll go back to last season, the 3-3, probably one of the games of the season for me. And then the one before that we probably lost our heads at, and plenty of Liverpool fans watched that too. That probably put us on the Liverpool radar. Went on when Nunes scored twice. Go back and check that. If you want to laugh, Liverpool fans, instead of giving us abuse in the comments, go back and watch that and watch us be all upset and angry at Darwin Nunes scoring twice and things like that. So yeah, enjoy that. But on Monday night we'll be back at St James's Park reflecting on the entire situation. Hopefully a Newcastle United win, but I think it's going to be an interesting affair regardless. So yeah, if you want to catch that, please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe and ring the bell for all your latest Geordie Journos content. Comment below what you think of everything, score predictions below, what you think's going to happen in the game and what you think could happen in the transfer market as well. And Eddie Howe alluded to Newcastle fans will welcome Alexander Isak back at some stage. Will you welcome him back? Let us know that as well. But for now, Jordan Cronin, Dominic Scurr, we've been Geordie Journos. You can catch our work we do as journalists over on Newcastle World from Jordan and shieldsgazette.com from myself. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you at St James's Park on Monday night.